Alright you guys, this episode of Paradigm Profiles is called Sureños Slain by Fellow Sureños in Merced County Jail. On June 18, 2018, Angel Guzman and Santiago Psycho Martinez conspired to kill a fellow Sureño gang member, Fabian Cardoza, in what was described as gang politics. Psycho was already serving time for a 2010 murder of an individual named Michael Ramirez that took place in Atwater, California. In 2018, Psycho was transferred to the Merced County Jail from Folsom State Prison to face additional charges for his role in Operation Scrapbook. Law enforcement obviously found some humor in coining the title of this operation, as it was titled using the derogatory term scrap that Norteños used to describe Sureño gang members. On the flip side, Sureños used their own derogatory term buster to describe Norteño gang members. Operation Scrapbook was launched on May 11, 2017 and culminated in the arrest of 49 suspected Sureño street gang members and their associates. The operation is considered to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, wiretap investigations targeting the Mexican mafia and their Sureño subordinates operating on the streets. These types of operations usually target the Nuestra Familia and their street regiments because of the level of organization and the manner in which they function. So it's rare to see Sureño street gang members targeted like this. Some of the more active Sureño subsets that were targeted in this investigation were A-Town Locals, Winton Barrio Park, and Southside Lokes, who all operated in Merced County communities. Obviously, this is a sign of the times and will probably become more common as the M and NF are in much more advantageous positions being back out on the main lines. This operation alone netted 120 firearms that included assault rifles and automatic weapons, $170,261 in cash, as well as cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine with an estimated street value of $1.7 million. It's probably safe to assume that this was a pretty significant setback and that this put a big dent in the MS coffers. Matter of fact, just based on the numbers alone, this case looks like it netted more than Operation Valley Star, and that was considered to be a massive investigation. The other guy who participated in the murder, Angel, was just convicted for his role in a stabbing that had also taken place in the jail a month before. The victim was also a fellow member who was accused of insubordination and not following directives that were passed down from a higher-ranking Sureño. Angel used a 7-inch slab of steel that was cut from a desk located in his cell. The victim was stabbed over 50 times and somehow managed to survive his injuries. If you can't kill someone with a 7-inch slab of steel and you hit them 50 times, I think it's pretty safe to assume that you're not trying to kill him. When Angel moved on the victim was inside his cell with his back turned. But once the victim realized what was happening, he apparently fought back and did his best to ward off the blows. Angel was allegedly sent to do the stabbing by himself, but if he wasn't flying solo, this probably would have had a different outcome. It's not unusual for one guy to move on a target like this, but more often than not, either bombers or another backup is sent in to overpower the target and so as to avoid situations like this from occurring. Angel was convicted for the stabbing and was sentenced to 9 years in state prison. A few weeks after the stabbing, Angel and Psycho began plotting on killing another fellow Sureño gang member by the name of Fabian Little Man Cardoza. Little Man was originally arrested on May 2, 2018 for a strong-arm robbery charge and had been housed with Angel and Psycho ever since. According to information derived from court transcripts, Psycho had apparently been in communication with other high-ranking Sureños that were in another part of the jail. It was through these communications that Psycho was informed about Little Man being in bad standings with the gang and that he had a green light on him. Allegations were made about Little Man that involved the possibility of him making statements to police and that he was a possible informant. The case he supposedly made statements in was against 3 other Sureño gang members that were also in custody at the jail who were fighting a homicide. Despite the fact that they had no paperwork or anything in black and white that substantiated these allegations against Little Man, Psycho still approached Angel about assisting him with hitting Little Man and putting his plan in motion. On June 17, 2018, the day before the homicide, Psycho used several strips of his bed sheet to construct a braided rope that he planned to use to strangle Little Man. Psycho obviously used little or no discretion when it came to the planning of this, because he would later end up leaving the braided sheet around Little Man's neck, and then he also left the sheet he used to rip the strips from on his assigned mattress. Detectives with the Merced Sheriff's Department who were appointed to investigate the case would later connect the braided portion of the sheet with the one that was still on Psycho's bed. On the night that Little Man was killed, Psycho apparently told Angel to befriend Little Man and spark up conversation with him in his cell. Psycho's plan at that point was to enter Little Man's cell, introduce himself as Angel's boy, join in on the conversation, and then at some point have Angel hold Little Man down while he strangled him. The plan was carried out with precision and was almost flawless, but what Psycho didn't anticipate was the level of resistance Little Man put up fighting for his life. Little Man was only about 5'5" and weighed about $160 soaking wet. Psycho and Angel were both good-sized dudes. Angel was about 5'10". He had a stocky build and he weighed about 210 pounds. Psycho was about 5'8", medium build, and he weighed about 185 pounds. So these guys were a lot bigger than Little Man, but his will to live was the equalizer. When Angel and Psycho rushed Little Man and tried to take him down to the ground, the fight was on. Little Man kept trying to break away and run out of the cell. All the other Sureños in the pod were out in the day room for their daily recreation program, and many of them started to hear the commotion. Several of them would later become witnesses to the murder. In fact, as Angel and Psycho were both on top of Little Man holding him down, several other Sureños in the pod walked by the cell and peered in through the window. According to their statements, they only walked away after Psycho looked at them and made an aggressive gesture to get away from the window. But the key witnesses were some of the Sureños that were housed in the neighboring cells. One of these guys stated that he heard a commotion coming from Little Man's cell, as if someone was fighting or banging on the walls. This caused him to stand up on top of his sink so that he could put his ear to the adjoining air vent and listen more closely to what was happening. According to his statement, he heard Little Man begging and pleading for Angel and Psycho to stop their assault. At this point, Angel was straddling Little Man's lower extremities and was bear hugging his legs to restrict his movement. Psycho also had the full brunt of his body weight on Little Man's upper body as he began strangling him and trying to stop him from moving. The guy who was listening through the air vent claims he heard loud groaning, almost unhuman-like, and that he could also hear loud choking noises. Despite Little Man's pleas for them to stop killing him, Psycho only twisted the rope harder until Little Man eventually succumbed to the assault and stopped moving. Once they were sure he was dead and was no longer moving, they laid him on top of his bunk and then pulled the sheets and blankets up to give off the impression that Little Man was asleep. Coincidentally, although correctional staff performed several body counts where they physically entered the pod and did visual checks on all the inmates, Little Man's dead body wasn't discovered until almost 24 hours later. Prior to this incident, a similar incident took place in the jail where 6 gang members killed another gang member who was also in bad standings with the gang. This resulted in Merced County jail officials being held to answer for certain things that were attributed to liability and security. It was definitely reason for the jail to implement some much needed changes and to take a better look at how jail officials could protect inmates from incidents like this from happening again. But despite concerted efforts and claims of revising a lot of the jail's security policies, this incident would still occur with Little Man less than 2 years later. Some inmates claim that it's gotten worse and that jail officials do very little to protect inmates who may be in danger of being assaulted by other inmates. In the 2015 incident, 6 known Norteño gang members were charged with murder for their participation in the beating death of a fellow Norteño. Jesse Rodriguez, Michael Turner, Jose Santana, Brendan Chan Milnatha, Francisco Gonzalez, and Anthony Salinas were all charged with the beating death of Alejandro Vega. The beating took place in full view of an open dorm in another part of the jail that housed validated Norteño gang members. The victim, Vega, was beaten into a coma and had suffered head injuries so severe that his family opted to take him off life support the following day. Santana, who was identified by detectives as being one of the main instigators, was also identified as being the OA, overall security, for the Norteños in that part of the jail. After Vega entered the housing unit and was subjected to the new arrival Norteño screening process, Santana allegedly received information from one of the household's members that Vega was no good and that he had been deemed no good by a previous OA for being a confidential informant. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. The third part of the Q&A will be coming out next, so be looking for that to drop sometime after the weekend. We also have more calls behind the walls dropping, so hopefully this is a new segment on the channel that you guys are liking. Again, as I've been saying, we're trying to give you guys a variety of different content besides the prison genre and the content that we've been putting out. So we're trying to expand our horizons. We have the panel with Sandman, the Inner Demons life story I've been doing, the audio book reading, these profiles, and the podcast with me and Joshua. We're also tinkering with the idea of doing a clubhouse, so we've got a lot in store for you guys. I know our other channel, Paradigm Entertainment Productions, has been sitting stagnant for a while, but we're going to be dropping content on that channel too. So if you're not subscribed, help us out by subscribing. Chances are we'll be going live tonight, so check out our community page for updates on release times later that should happen sometime around 6:45 and 7. On that note there, we want to extend our gratitude and appreciation to all of you, as always, for continuing to support us, for giving us positive feedback, and for just helping us grow. Without you guys, the viewers, we would cease to exist.